I'm the president of the Board of Trustees for the Western States 100 Miler. I want to welcome all of you and thank you for being here for this event tonight. Really appreciate the turnout tonight. I think this is going to be a really great and interesting talk tonight. We have three of the really important people in our history that are going to be here tonight that are going to share some of the great story that is our race. So I'm going to introduce them briefly, and then one of them is going to do she has a wonderful presentation for you, and then after that we'll rearrange the stage here quickly, and our three guests of honor will be up here for questions and any other things that you might want to ask them as well. And we also have my co-moderator here tonight is Tim Twietmeyer, 5-time race champion, 25-time finisher, past president. So if you wouldn't mind giving Tim a round of applause. So starting next to the other tall guy next to Tim is the first person to ever run the entire 100-mile distance on foot, not on horse, back in 1974. He's a 22-time finisher. I think if you count his 2010 finish, which was a little bit outside of 30 hours, 23 times, right, Gordy, then?
It was only because your staff wouldn't give me a beer.
Complaints. And just one of the iconic figures of the race, Mr. Dr. Gordy Ainsleigh. We also have another doctor here as well. Many of you know Robert Lind. He's, without question, one of the most important figures we've ever had, if not the most important figure we've ever had on the medical side of things and what we do. He pretty much has developed the template for the care of runners, and also the poking and prodding and the researching that we do here with the race for all the runners who come through the race. Dr. Lind has been there from the very beginning. Not only for our race, but the horse race, and you'll see why the relationship between the Tevis Cup and our race is very important, how one kind of begat the other. And Bob Lind is one of those important figures who has straddled both those worlds extremely well. He was the medical director for several decades, and is our medical director emeritus, Dr. Robert Lind. And the lovely lady to my right here is known affectionately as the Mother Superior of the race, and for good reason. It is because of her love and appreciation of the trail and the people that are involved with the trail and the race and all the possibilities of what this could have been when very few people really understood what it could be. And that's kind of why tonight's title is appropriate, because really the way the race was able to come together, I don't know if people would have believed that it was possible, but it was because of the vision of people. Get a little emotional here, excuse me, but Shannon Weil is one of these rare people who opens her heart up, and because of that fact, the race became what it is today. So our third distinguished guest here, Shannon Weil. Now, before we get to Shannon's presentation here, Tim, I think, was going to kind of help us segue into Shannon's presentation here. So Tim wanted to say a couple of quick words here. So Tim?
Thanks, John. I was at this briefing for the AmeriCorps crew that's been working on the trail to get them ready 6 weeks ago. They've been doing some phenomenal work on the trail, and they showed it the movie that day called Across the Mountains. They Crossed the Mountains, and it was the story of the Western States Trail, the people that actually founded the trail, built the trail, gave it all the history. The people like John C. Fremont, the Robert Watsons, the Wendell Robies. And I thought, wow, those guys are real pioneers. These are the people that read about in history books and have all this documentation about all this greatness that they brought at a time when it was really difficult and nobody thought that was the right thing to do. And then I thought about these three up here tonight, and I thought, these are the next generation of pioneers. When you think about race promotion and getting something off the ground that's become an iconic event in a sport. And Dr. Lind, around his his establishing runner guidelines about care on the race and how we respond to emergencies and how we research and how we can get better information out there on the medical side. And then Gordy around just what is the limit of human potential. If everybody would listen to what Gordy was telling me, we wouldn't be here tonight. So, I mean, in perspective for these guys, and it's kind of like, well, those Fremonts and Watsons and Wendells of the early 1900s and before that was that group. And this is the next group that's carrying that tradition on to others that are going to pick up and take what they did just like they did from Fremont and the rest. So, job well done, guys, and I'm really anxious to see all the history here, because even as long as I've been around this thing, I don't know all the stories. So we'll turn it over to Shannon, because she's the one that has all the stories to tell, and we'll get the perspectives of the other two as we go.
Thank you, Tim. Hey, I just want to say, if there are any veterans in the room tonight, are there? No? Okay. Yes? I just want to say thank you on this Memorial Day weekend. I was very happy to hear about this invitation to come and this opportunity to share this story. And I thought about it for a while, and what am I going to do, and blah, blah, blah. And a couple of weeks ago, I thought, you better get your off the dime, because this is fast approaching. So I spent the last 2 weeks spending about 5 to 8 hours a day putting this together. So I hope you like it. A lot of the pictures that you're going to see are familiar to you. They've been on Facebook, they've been in our programs. There are some surprises in here, but what I've done is put them in a chronological order. So, okay, so am I in your way? Okay, I'll sit down as long as I can. Okay, so basically, the Western States Trail was established largely, from the, no, please don't. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so it was established by the Indians, the Paiute Indians that used to travel the trails. And then, of course, when the gold rush struck, the world rushed in, and the miners were out there, and they were digging up everything in sight. And if this movie that Tim was just talking about, They Crossed the Mountains, Gordy, if you haven't seen that, you need to get a copy of it. It's available at the Teva store. It's probably available through the Run store. It's a wonderful, wonderful story about the trail. And Gordy Ainsleigh gives an ideal description of why the gold ended up way up in the top of the mountain. So I highly recommend it. But here's Last Chance. You ran through Last Chance yesterday. Didn't look like that, did it? So Robert Montgomery Watson was a constable and pathfinder, trail finder. He lived in Kings Beach, and he taught Wendell Roby the trail. And they kind of cleared the brush and traveled the course, and Wendell learned it. And then Wendell was, I love, Robert Watson is one of my all-time heroes. And rumor had it, he lived in Kings Beach, he had a girlfriend in Forest Hill. So you figure that out, how long they traveled that. Okay, as you know, this is the Fort Sumter at the top of Immigrant Pass at night, but right around there is the Watson Monument, which we love so dearly. And Wendell and his friends marked the entire trail. They spend a lot of time out there on horseback. And that footage, the raw footage of their trip when this photo was taken, it was the seed, it was the essence that was used in that documentary. I was able to help work on it, and it's a wonderful piece. So Wendell was challenged to whether or not horses were as good as they were 100 years prior. And he was put up to a bet. And he said, well, I know 100 miles of trail, and we can try this. So he sent out a call, and 1, 2, 3, 4 other riders showed up in front of the post office at Kings Beach, Tahoe City in 1955. Because Wendell was going to prove that this could be done. Ride 100 miles on a horse in 24 hours. So what they did was they made up these envelopes. And you see here the postmarks? That was the timing system for the ride at the Tahoe City Post Office and the Auburn Post Office. Okay? All right, now look at this picture very closely. This is important, people. This is important information. You see, you've got your Pony Express rider here. Everybody knows about the Pony Express, right? Here's an Indian up on the hill. There's, hey, I was out trying to get a pizza and I forgot something. I do have a pointer here. Would you excuse me for just a minute? Okay. All right, we're back. Okay, so here are the Indians up on the hills. So I think this painting is called The Right Flank, and I think it hangs in the California Historical Museum. But I'm not sure. It's hard to find. Okay, so here it is. All right, now watch closely. This was the buckle that Wendell Roby and Christian Stegman designed. Christian Stegman was the father of Howard Stegman, who made our buckles for years. And they designed this shape and put that image. See, there's the little guys and the whole thing. It's the same image, got it? Okay, so now you're starting to feel like, well, maybe I'm related to the Pony Express. Well, maybe you are. And so this is, in my mind, one of the best buckles ever. And they were made at Irving and Jenkins in San Francisco, and they were a badge company. They made all the police and the firemen's badges and so on. So, okay, now we're gonna, here's Wendell Roby coming through Michigan Bluff. God, he was so marvelous. And that was a sample of the original trail signs that he used to put up. There he is, watering his horse at the finish line of the Tevis out of his canteen. And see here also, he's carrying a bag, you know, sort of like the mochila that the Pony Express rider wore over their saddle to carry them in. So here's a couple people I want you to meet, and I want you to remember these names. This gentleman right here is Charlie Barrio, and he was a photographer, and he literally documented the early years of the sport of endurance riding with his camera. This is Wendell Roby here. Kind of a smallish man, but very perky, you know. I always felt like after work at night, he'd say goodbye, everybody, and he would go home and sit in a chair and plug his finger into a light socket, you know, and recharge. You know, he just had an immense energy, marvelous. I just adored him. And here he is, out on the trail, Wendell here, and he's interacting with the radio operator during one of the Western States trail ride events. And that would be up at Michigan Bluff. Now, if you wanted to go see Wendell, you went to visit him here. This is the Central California Federal Savings. It's at the top, the old building is at the top of Lincoln Way in Auburn. And we, you know, always had the time and temperature sign there. We're always very helpful. And it was, this was the building where the Western States Trail Foundation was started. And if you wanted to go visit Wendell, this is what you would walk into his offices, and this is what you would be greeted by. Wendell Roby and Drusilla Barner, right here.
I'm a shotgun.
And yeah, and this was at the Hart Federal Savings and Loan. My office, I sat right outside this office. And you'll see this is the security system for the entire savings and loan.
Nobody ever robbed it.
Nobody ever robbed it. And I loved it because it was always kind of messy. And here's this guy, he's got this huge, empire, and his office is kind of a wreck. And Drew did everything. If you wanted to talk to Wendell, you went through Drew. And Gordy will certainly elaborate on that. So he was always up for a challenge. So I have been keeping this story under wraps for decades, but now it's time for you to know it. And that is that once Wendell was starting the horse ride, and he wanted people to come and, join him, he wanted anybody to come. So he invited the marching team from the Fort Riley, Kansas, 1st Infantry Division, the marching team, to come out and cover the 100 miles on foot. That was 1972. You notice the little boots up there? Okay. So he enlisted the services of his favorite son-in-law, grandson-in-law, pardon me. This is Jim Larimer and his horse Smoke. And Jim Larimer, as you may or may not know, has done a significant amount of work and contributions to trails. The Western States Trail, the Roby Park in Truckee, he's just been amazing. Unfortunately, he passed away last year at the tender age of my age. Okay, so Jim signed up for the job, and here come the soldiers. So they started out with heavy packs and their, fatigues and their, boots and the canteens and all this stuff. And they're coming through Mission Bluff when this picture was taken by Charlie Barrio. And Smoke. Where's Smoke? Well, along with the other remaining group that you don't see, and Smoke, they dropped off. Smoke was too fast for these guys, so they had to let him go. And a couple of years ago, I called Jim and I said, I need to know the story about the marching team. Tell me, tell me, tell me. And he said that on that day, that everyone in that group, at one time or another, got on Smoke. So none of them covered the entire 100 miles on foot. Okay? So that was still, an unknown whether or not it could be done. So here they are coming through Forest Hill. Yeah, no change. It was pretty sleepy up there. That's why I left. Okay, so then somebody's looking for a bathroom or somebody. Here they come. Jim Larimer is right there. He's doing a good job. He was a ride and tie champion, along with Gordy Ainsleigh, as a matter of fact. Okay, so now 7 of them made it to Auburn, okay, and that was fine, but it wasn't perfect. So in the meantime, during this era, I think Gordy even rode his horse in 72. But mostly what he was doing was he was running with his horse. So here he is with golden locks flopping and his horse going down the trail. And it was finally, and I'm going to let Gordy tell his story a little better when he gets up here, but it was Drusilla Barner who was the catalyst that Gordy's going to tell this story for you, but she was the one that finally said, Gordy, when are you going to run it on foot? So Gordy So this picture was taken probably in 77, 78. So this was the old original building here, the Central California Federal Savings. And this is the new building that was built, and it went way out. And it's now standing in the bank, which is next door to where the current Western States Endurance Run headquarters is. Okay, so here's Gordy. I love this. The first time I ever laid eyes on Gordy was in '76, and I drove by there, and Gordy was building. He was a laborer on that building. You were actually building it, helping build it.
Building the concrete forms.
Yeah, yeah. And my friend Phil Gardner said, "That's Gordy Ainsleigh. He's the first guy that ran the Western States, you know." Yeah, we hot smoke it. There we go. Sorry. Okay. Drew, Gordy, okay. All right. Pete Hansen, bless his heart, he was in Colfax, and he coached Gordy. So this whole, Gordy just didn't wake up one morning and say, I think I'm going to run 100 miles. He planned long and hard, and Pete Hansen helped him with this miraculous feat.
Colfax High School distance running coach.
Yeah. Okay, so finally the day comes, Squaw Valley, August 3rd, 1974, and the way it all began. Thank you, Gordy. So this picture has never been seen before. I have been hiding this for a long time. And right here, of course, you have a horse, and all these people are in awe. This is veterinarian Jim Edwards, who was checking the horses, wonderful guy, and he's doing a little checking your pulse, right?
Oh, heartbeat and respiration.
Yeah. So there you are, standing there, as big as day. And on your way. And here you have your good buddy Cal Mountain Clyde over here. And I love the way the people are looking at you in awe in this picture. It's just so wonderful.
That's Bob Ranta back there, by the way.
Bob who?
Ranta.
Oh, okay.
Carol
Yeah.
Ranta's husband.
Uh-huh.
Cal Mountain.
So we had success. Gordy had success anyway. So the following year we had one runner, Ron Kelly, who came from Alturas, thank you. And he got to No Hands Bridge, and his dad said, "Come on, son, get in the truck, let's go home." And that's the last we ever saw. So it's kind of a sad story, but
Nobody needs a crew like that.
Yeah. And then the next year, 1976, was Cowman, and he ran with the horses. And he had his horse there, right there. Okay. Now listen, check out the water bottle. Yeah, I mean it was all like, make it happen for yourselves, guys, so that's the way it was. So he's quite fashionable out there.
Still dresses like that.
And, okay, so here we are at the 1977, the next year. It's going to be the Western States National Endurance Run. So actually, after okay, never mind. So anyway, we took that word out, and it used to be that word is actually right there on 9 buckles. Cowman has one of those buckles. So pre-race meeting. So this is Gordy, or Andy Gonzalez, and Peter Maddy. Is that you, Gordy?
Oh.
Yeah. And Wendell is there, and Dr. Lynn is there. And they're talking about it. Yeah, what's going to happen? Here's a close-up of some of the specimens. So the next morning, Dr. Lind weighs them in, and he's going to tell you more about that process a little later. And there's a start. Is that Carol Van Ness next to you, Dr. Lind?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so.
Is that in the meadow, Shannon?
You'll have to ask Dr. Lind, because I was busy getting my horse ready. Because I was riding that day. So, this is John Kappas. He was a physicist from Los Alamos, New Mexico, from the lab there. And who else? There's Gordy, and there's Andy Gonzalez. And the two guys from Colorado. Here's Gordy, he didn't run that year. And a couple other. Okay, so here they are out on the trail. There's 1, 2, 3 runners back there in the dust of the horses, headed up. They're on Lion Ridge, headed up to Cougar Rock. This is Peter Matty, a name you need to know, and Ralph Paffenbarger, and Andy Gonzalez. And these are the two guys from Colorado scrambling up Cougar Rock. And Dick Mendenhall, Major Dave Niederhaus, Marine. He was so determined to make this a success.
And Niederhaus and Mendenhall had both won 100-mile flat runs on track.
Prior to this?
Yes, and so they came in expecting one of them would win.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Okay, good. Elephant's Trunk. And who else was out on the trail that day? Hey, it's me!
Flannel shirt on.
Yeah.
Middle of July with the flannel.
Well, it was early in the morning, you know, and I always dress for comfort, you know, but I would wear shoes with no socks. And, you know, I was comfortable. But I got, and notice also, this might not mean a lot to you guys, but I am riding a McClellan saddle, which is a U.S. Cavalry issue McClellan saddle, which I loved riding back in those years. So I was coming out of Robinson Flat on my horse, got vetted through, everything's chipper, on my way, I felt great, and I passed John Kappas, and I look at this small human being, and he was running with only one kidney, and he was just trotting along. And I was so impressed by that, and I kind of like let that sit with me all day. So at this point, I was now out ahead of the runners. And at the end of the day, 3 of them finished, which would have been Andy Gonzalez winning under 24 hours. But here's the cue for a lot of you who finished under 30 hours. Because Ralph Paffenbarger and Peter Matty wanted to continue on their own after 24 hours, which they were allowed to do. We established the 30-hour cutoff. So it was these 2 guys that really inspired us to include everybody, not just fast people, but everybody. And I mean, Dr. Paffenbarger was like a heart specialist, and these are 2 high-profile, extremely successful guys. Okay, so there we have it. It's, you know, 77. And at this point, I am like, I was going through Volcano Canyon, which you guys passed through yesterday. And it was, I was like right ahead of, I was hopscotching back and forth, leapfrogging with Andy. And while I was going through that canyon, I just, you know, went, this run is going to be a hit, and I am going to make sure it is. My exact thought. And that's where I got it. And So from that moment on, I was completely compelled to do anything I could to make it a success. So then we started the Gang of Four, which would be Kurt Sproul here, Mo Livermore, Phil Gardner, and Shannon. And as couples, we were married. At the time, actually, to tell you the truth, in this picture, Phil and I had separated. So, but we were still friends. Can you tell? Okay. Anyway, we all got together and we did a great job of like figuring out what we were going to do. Phil was excellent. He's a engineer, so he's very good at. He laid out all logistics. He set out where all the aid stations should go. He knew the trail very well. He was a pioneer of endurance riding. He was the first president of the American Endurance Ride Conference. He rode with Wendell when Wendell would say, "Come on, let's go up and to Robinson Flat and ride out to Cougar Rock," and Phil was right there with him. And this is when the pavement on the Forest Hill Road stopped at Michigan Bluff Road at Baker Ranch. The rest of it was all dusty, long road. And so they would haul up there, they'd climb on their horses and ride out. So he was a pioneer out there with Wendell Roby, and I really respected that. So here we go. So Kurt, a schmoozer, it's like he's just, just the nicest, funniest guy on earth. But he wanted to go out and he wanted to spend tons of money on advertising, and let's put a big full-page ad in Runner's World magazine, and let's tell the world all about this. And I said, no, we can't do that. First of all, we didn't have any money. Second of all, I said, we need to build the race from the inside out. We need to teach all our volunteers what's going on. We need to slowly build this, and it will spread by word of mouth. I was convinced that was the right way to do it. And so I won, fortunately. So all of the people that came to help us, all the volunteers that came to help us run aid stations were horse riders, were endurance riders. So this whole thing grew out of the horse world. So I told you my office was right outside of Wendell Roby's. Well, here it was. Wendell's office is behind here. You can see he's got an original Pony Express Trail sign on the wall. Those are hard to come by. Even back then, this was in the 70s, even back then they're hard to come by. But no, he had one up on it. He had stuff everywhere. It was so fun being in that office. Craig, now you can see the difference. So we're like the week before the run of probably 78 or 79. And I wanted to really, my real job was to handle retirement accounts. So don't you think that putting on the run was a little more fun? So Wendell, he liked me, so he just sort of let me do whatever I wanted to do. And so here we are at this savings and loan, and here's Shannon, just sort of like wall-to-wall Shannon, as my mother used to call me, and spread everything out to accommodate the run. It's the run. So, and also, Mo would kill me if I didn't mention that she would come in after hours, and we would have long meetings, and we would write the brochures, we would plan things. She and I did everything. And always, I had to put this in here, with a pile of M&Ms on the table. So we were fueled by M&Ms. So she said, be sure to put that in. And there you have it. Okay, so, but this is what we wanted to do. Here's Mo telling you that we wanted to share our backyard. Wendell taught us to embrace this trail, to love the mountains, to embrace the Sierra. He used to call me into his office, sit me down in some chairs next to his desk, and tell me history of the trail and the mountains. I still have those chairs at my house, which I treasure. But so this is what we wanted to do. This is why we were so inspired. Wendell made us feel safe. And so we wanted to share what we were being taught by him. So the mountains, the canyons, the rivers. Oh, there's a note here. It says, the Western States Trail was a route for champions. And that was said by Friedrich von Lederberg, who was a rider that came to ride the Tevis from Austria. So, so here, you know, we weren't going for the big advertising, but finally, Dr. Lynn wrote an article about the run. And he, you know, 6 pages, and he had the photos from Charlie Barria. And off he sent it to Runner's World. Rich Bagneau at Runner's World. Look at this fabulous map that he made, the profile. And it wasn't until recently that I learned that Bob Lynn did this. I didn't know where that came from, and I was wondering. So, I mean, look at that graph paper, everything, you know. So he sent it off to Runner's World, and we get this. Unfortunately, we have no room in our current plans for such an article. Okay. All right, so back to the woods. Here we go. We just carried on, and we put together the following year. I love this copy of this thing with the wine glass stain on it. You know, somebody was really deliberating over that. So we carried on and went forth and started having a lot of fun. And then people started coming all the way from San Francisco. I was so thrilled. And this is one of our most favorite pictures. Tony Strada, also from San Francisco. Somehow his connections got screwed up, and he didn't have anybody to pass his Perry Como sweater off to, and his flight bag that held his wingtip shoes. So he carried them to Robinson Flat. Now, wouldn't you? And okay, and now look also here. There's a water. What is that? A canteen or something? I love the early stuff, you know. Okay, more Marines. Rick Rosso and Steve Mason. Okay.
Rick Rosso was a horror. He looked like the Terrible Hulk. He had muscles everywhere.
And we Andy Gonzalez and Jim Howard. Racine. That was 78. You notice that. Let me explain Andy's outfit. He took a pair of black running shorts and cut off the outer layer. And ran to Auburn in them. Okay, you laugh, but you know what? No water bottles. He didn't carry water bottles. And look at him. He was tougher than nails. And he won in 78, along with our first woman finisher, Pat Smythe. And he not only won, but he borrowed my shoes. Because his, we have the same shoe, the same size, and I have big feet. And the tread on his was really worn down, and mine were pretty new. So I said, you can wear these. So he did. So these sit in the window at the Auburn Running Company today. So here's the Wendell Roby Cup And it's quite wonderful. And about a week or so before, a couple of weeks before the run in '78, Wendell got this trophy, and he said, okay. And I said, you gotta have it engraved. And I gotta take it down to Sacramento to have it engraved because on a round, surface. And so I said, Wendell, you have to write what you want on it. So it was Friday. So he said, oh, I'll have it to you by Monday. So Monday morning I came into the office and he had a little storeroom right next to where I sat that connected to his office. And that's where he had his afternoon vanilla ice cream. And so I came in on Monday morning and I opened the door. And the whole floor of this little building, a little room, was just covered in yellow sheets of, lined paper. They were just, like ripped off, wadded up, and thrown around. The whole floor was covered in this. And each one, I opened them up and it said, Worth marks the blah, 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 blah. And the next one. He was working out the saying that went on this trophy. And, it was like each new sheet of paper ended up on the floor. And he ended up with the marvelous saying that's on this trophy that begins with Worth marks the man. So these were our awards at the time. We had the Thurman Trophy for the women, and for the 30-hour finishers we had a plaque. And then somehow we didn't even get a picture of the buckle. We just had a flat piece that we improvised there for the program that year. We didn't have our little iPhones to take pictures of things. So we started out a little slow. Ann Trayson won that trophy 10 times, and so we gave her the damn thing. '79 at Squaw Valley, there's Wendell. And Mo and I have always called ourselves Moshan because that's what we cause is motion. And we were there with Wendell. And I'm so pleased that he was able to see this event launch. So here we are with Dr. Lind as well at the start. And the racers took off in the snow. I mean, anybody that complains about snow, well, we had snow with a lot. The equipment was a lot less durable in those days too. So here's Gordy taking off in the snow. And on that particular year, his girlfriend's dog Merlin trotted along with him for the entire 100 miles. Kurt Sproul, he was our first president, and Dan. So people were catching on to this whole thing and getting the hang of it, and we were starting to get more and more people. And then, all of a sudden, we got a t-shirt logo. So Penny DeMoss, I don't know if you ever remember her, she lived in the Bay Area, and she was a fabulous runner and an artist, and she developed this logo for us, and this is actually Steve Prefontaine, which, when we first saw it, okay, no sense in worrying about that. So we have t-shirts to put on people, and here we are out at the meadow. I'm right there in my jeans, and hey, I heard you guys crossed the Little River yesterday. How was it?
Awesome.
This is Rucky Chucky. This is how you crossed Rucky Chucky in the early years. No rope. So it was pretty crazy. But I'll tell you something about it. At one time there was a dam there because we used to ride our horses across Rucky Chucky. And that all washed away, of course. So Dr. Lind helping somebody at the finish line. Let's see what's going on here. This was the finish line. a far cry from today's incredible village that it has become. And we were kind of unprepared. It was sort of like, anybody got a Band-Aid? Look at that. I mean, there was just nothing there. And we just sort of pulled it together by the seat of our pants. And even the banner didn't make it across the finish line. Now you wonder, if you've never seen this incredible structure that holds the start and finish line banner for the run today, this is why we have that. And along the way, somehow, Bruce Malden, a runner he was in Sacramento, I think he's in Southern California now, but he nicknamed me Mother Superior, which sort of stuck over the years. Okay, now, Mike Catlin, he was a two-time winner, and this picture is the Memorial Day weekend training camp. They're up at Devil Sum. So he's gonna, tell them what's going on here, getting everybody ready. So we have another early morning start, and away they go. Mike Catlin in 79 overslept, and he started the race 10 minutes late and won. So there's hope for everybody. The great thing about Mike Catlin, I loved watching him run because he ran like a cat. He was absolutely gorgeous to watch. And, we made the front page of the Auburn Journal. We got some more publicity. Doug Latimer burns out, and Catlin wins. Sally Edwards, who was the founder of Fleet Feet, she won that year. And we were starting to gain a little traction. So, there was a new breed of people showing up. These are ultra runners. Anybody recognize anybody there?
Come on, Tim.
This is Tim's first 50-mile run. And the fun began. I mean, it was just a blast. People were coming from all over, just like many of you have. And it was just fun, funny. And our numbers kept growing and growing. And Lynn Harris was there to laugh all the way. And it was just a blast. We'd have campouts. The best parties were at Michigan Bluff with Carol and Richards, of course. If you get a chance to drop in, oh dear. And then when some runners are in pain. Here we have Andy Gonzalez, Sally Edwards, Peter Matty, Miss Boohoo. This is Paul Rees. Oh, thank you, dear. And this is Cor van der Kuyp from the Netherlands. And there you have it. So, okay, I want you to take a good look here at some of the running and the water devices. We have these little 4-packs here. That looks like a Boda belt there. And God only knows. It was, there were a lot of experimentation going on. And then finally, we got a lot of media coverage. And we were pretty happy about that. But you know what? Here's what they had to say about us.
Still true.
Well, okay. We'll shake that one off. And these guys are going out to prove it. Here's Mike Catlin right there. This is Andy over here. Rich Dingus here. Lander Coy here. Okay. And then the following year, Doug Latimer and Jim Howard tied. And I had a wonderful picture of them coming across the finish line together, but I gave it to Craig, and I didn't have time to get a picture of it. So But Doug Latimer was a completely wonderful competitor, and I was on our board for many, many years. So you don't see this too much anymore, you know, this kind of camaraderie. But we saw a lot of it, and this was before all the glop and glurp that's on the market today was established. People were absolutely shocked. You know, today, after the Sunday, people are dancing around and like nothing happened because they've taken so good care of themselves throughout the race. And we've learned so much. Thank you, Dr. Lynn. And, you know, here's the finish line. Get that truck up. So Gil Lang, one of the doctors that used to help out in Bob Lynn here, tending to Steve Warschauer. He used to be a top 10 runner. And Tim.
Tim Twietmeyer.
Yep. He was just a kid. Jim Howard winning. God, look at that banner again. And as I used to like make all these rubber stamp things, invitations and everything to jolly everybody along and, you know, attract attention to the run, and had a good time doing that. And then Jim King arrived. Boy, that was fun. The first time I saw him was up at the Tahoe race around the lake. I was crewing for Ray Clark, and Ray was leading until about 10 miles to the finish. And here comes Jim King. And Ray and I looked at each other and we said, "Who's that?" And we said, afterwards, we said, "You've got to come and run Western States." And so he did. And boy, he did. Okay, so Bjorg Ostrom Smith, she was an amazing competitor, tough as nails. And, okay, who's going to go down the list? Shout them out, shout them out.
Jim King.
Jim King.
Jim Pellet. Steve Warschauer. Mark Brotherton. Bill Davis.
Louder.
Gerber.
Terry Gerber.
Kathy Donofrio.
Yep.
Cindy Johnson. What's her first name? Johnson.
Johnson. If you've ever seen the movie, I think it was a Wide World of Sports documentary, Vicki Johnson, and she fell, and she's at White Oak Flat, and Dr. Kirby's trying to talk her out of leading the run, quitting, and she said, "No, I'm going on." I mean, open to the knee, you know, the whole knee was open. And they bandaged her up, and she continued. So, bless her heart. This is Carol LaPlante and Bjorg Ostrom Smith. And there's Kurt, and I am right there in the yellow in the back. See, the tablecloths. I was always into the tablecloths and the flowers and the, you know, make it pretty. These people have done a lot. They need to be treated well. So, and this is Charles Savage. And my dear friend Mo. And Mo couldn't be here today, and she really wanted to, but she sends a message. So that's for Mo. And then Dr. Lynn has his valuable medical studies. And he became the starter of the race. Betty Veal was, she was the first secretary in 1955 for the Tevis Cup ride, the Western States Trail ride, and she helped Wendell, and then she just made the segue over to the run when we developed the run, and so she kept track of everything, everybody. And I know, because when she passed away, I was her executor, and I cleaned out her ranch, and now I have all her records of everything she saved. So she was well loved. And on her 45th year of service, we gave her this incredible plaque. which is a treasure. We have our volunteers to thank. Erman Sands was one of the first people that worked at Rocky Chucky, the river crossing, and he actually bought the rope. He actually bought the rope that's down there. And what they did is he was a Jeeper, you know, and he backed his Jeep down on one side of the river, backed another Jeep down on the other side of the river, and then they got the rope across, and then they went, "Arr!" And then they stretched the rope across to make it tight enough for people to go across. So I always said, you're in good hands with Erman Sands. I love that man. And Rex Maynard, and one night I was, after a race, we didn't have anything at Devil Sum, nothing. And I kept running into Rex Maynard around town. He was one of the only people that was out on the trails on foot back in these days, in the early 70s, or late 70s. And he said to me, "What can I do to help?" And I said, "Can you go into Devil Sum?" And he went in and braced up that aid station. And it's, you know, like going to the movies, going to a circus today. It's a marvelous place. And then Dennis Zyloff took it over. And our Taylor Ewell worked at the river for years. And we just really, really value the volunteers. One day, I was at my place at the Hart Federal, and this man walked in the door, and he was dressed in black leathers, and he had a black helmet, and he looked really scary. And he came in and he says, "Hey, I'm looking for where that run happens." And I'm going, "Brace yourself." And I said, "Right here, I'll talk to you." And he says, "My name's Hack. I'm a sign maker." And so he started making these incredible signs for us, for all the aid stations. Didn't matter how many we wanted. He would just whip them out. He was a sign maker for Rayleigh's, Rayleigh's Market and that whole outfit. So Bel Air, yeah. He did their signs. But he had all this material. He just gave it to us and cranked out these great signs. So it was like giving us, an identity too. So that was very cool. And it's the volunteers that really are the ones we have to thank. So on that note, we will thank them. And then, of course, in 1983, we established the Friend of the Trail Award. And it was dedicated in dedication of Nancy Ewell and recognizes the efforts of Western States volunteers who epitomize her selfless example. Oh, who's Nancy Ewell? Well, there she is. Yeah, she's my mother. She was my mother, and she was wonderful, and she was very helpful. She'd take her motor home set it up at Michigan Bluff, and feed and water everybody, and then after that closed down, she'd go, "Where do you want us now?" And we said, "Could you go over to the Green Gate?" And and then my dad would drive the motorhome over there, and they'd camp out at the Green Gate all night, and she had the little porch light on, and she'd sit there in her little chair, have a sleep, and runners would come paddling by, and she'd go, "You want some erg?" And she was just wonderful. So thank you, Mom. And she's probably here with us in spirit, Oh, I guess she is. And so my job was always to look for the weak link, where we needed to bolster things up and improve, always improve. So in '84, we were sort of drifting along, getting bigger, but we didn't really have an identity. So I was inspired by Cougar Rock to create something special from that. And so I went to go see this incredible sculptor in Napa by the name of Franco Vianello, and he gave us this. So that cougar became our icon. And then I visited another artist, and we worked out this logo, and onward. So Norm Klein comes along and was our race director for several years, many years actually, you know. And Tony Rossman showed up, who was just a wonderful human being. And for ceremony, we have the master. He just presents us so well. So, and one time, we even made Norm laugh. So, I have to show you this because I'm really kind of floored by it. I went up to Squaw Valley one weekend for the race, and Norm came over and said, "God, I need your help. I need your help." And I said, "What is it?" And he goes, "Well, Winterland, you know, Bill Graham Presents, the Winterland, they sponsored our T-shirts that year, and God only knows how." And he says, "We don't have a banner for them." And so he gave me a blank banner, and he says, "Can you make a banner?" I said, "Sure, I'll try." And he gave me a blank banner and a bunch of Marks-a-Lot pens, you know, marker pens. And I said, "Where's the logo?" And he gave me a copy of the logo. And I said, "Okay, I'll be back." So I went to my room. I had a friend with me, fortunately. And I laid the banner out on the floor. And I pulled out a couple of the drawers from the dressers. And I put them down to get some straight lines. And then I just went to work and I created this banner with marker pens. So I kind of like that, you know. And so Chuck Jones was great. He was I don't know. Have you ever seen the Wide World of Sports when he's interviewed and then, "What do you like about this?" And he just says, "I like running." That's his famous line, you know. And then Ann arrived. And, hey, you've grown, Austin.
Where's that kid now?
Yeah. And Tim made such an incredible splash. And, okay, now here we have this parade of buckles. We had the first one, which we felt we couldn't afford. We couldn't afford a sterling silver buckle. It was just out of our budget. And so we tried everything. We had the Fisherman's Wharf version of this awful cast thing. We had, somebody else did one. I took I don't know, it was embarrassingly bad. But we didn't know how to fix it, you know, and we didn't know that, everybody made a stab at it. You know, somebody's going to work on the buckles this year, and black, you know, and it was just awful. And finally, I just really got tired of this. And so I took my buckle, and I put it on the copy machine at work, and I photocopied it, and then I whittled down the cougar, you know, reduced it down, and cut it out, and pasted it on right there. I changed a couple of words, you know, and I can't even read what that says, but it was my proposal to the board to say, look, here's what we have to do to be the best. We have to redesign our buckle, take it from the ride, and go back to Howard Stegman at Comstock Silversmith. And I presented this to the board, and nobody could say no. And so we went with the complete sterling silver buckle with Comstock and have not looked back. And we went to Howard. Here we are at Howard Stegman's. God rest his soul, he passed last year, bless his heart. And we got this. So, and it won the Runner's World Best Award for 1 year when they had this Best of Running, whole issue on Best of Running. So I'm happy. I think everybody loves this thing, so that's good. So we have Greg Soderlin was our race director, of course, and then John Trent has led our way. Thank you, John. You've been wonderful. And so we've left our mark along the way. We've made history. We've built our credibility. We had an Elvis sighting. We worked with the Tahoe National Forest a lot. You guys feel like you live out there these days. And the Auburn State Recreation Area. And so from our humble beginnings to today, we helped change the face of Auburn's identity by making it the endurance capital of the world, including a big mural on the Dawson oil tanks in Auburn, which all these runners, which is so cool. And then a couple of years ago, they reshaped, reworked the downtown area and put in the endurance zone, and we just got it. We got it covered. We got these tiles dedicated to us, and actually, that's a picture of Frank Bazanich right there. So the Gang of Four got one, and Gordy and Drew Barner and Betty Beal and Dr. Lind and Robert Montgomery Watson and Wendell Roby and Tony Rossman and Charlie Barrio. So this is why we are the Western States 100.
So what we're going to do real quick here, everybody, is we're going to rearrange. We're going to bring our panelists up here. So just give us a minute or two to do that, and then we'll open it up for questions for everybody. And again, Shannon, you are a life force. Thank you.
And this is kind of one that you put in the bucket list. The ride from Straw Valley down to Auburn. I didn't think it was possible for horses to do this here. I got choked down. Anyway, she talked me into coming up there and being a ride doctor. So I was interested in horses and riders, what they were doing. And Hank Cook was a patient of mine. He was a veterinarian out at Robinson Flat. So I kind of came out to talk to him and see what they were doing with the horses. Well, Hank, the first thing I saw was one of the horses came in there and tipped over, was having a seizure, probably from hyponatremia. And I thought, man, that's a goner. So Hank took 5 liters of normal saline and plugged into the jugular. And I thought, well, I don't want to stick around for this finish. And so I walked away, came back in about 20 minutes, and this horse was walking around at that point. And I thought, man, I've seen a miracle. So I thought, well, he was explaining some of the other things with the horse race going on there. I got interested in all of this here, but got mostly interested in the laboratory they had going down at Michigan Bluff in a garage. And that was Todd Nelson. Todd Nelson down there, he ran through all the calculations he was doing, the studies of on sodium, and I think he was doing CPKs or muscle damage. They were checking the urine, I know that, for whatever damage they could figure out from that. And he explained a lot of the things that were going on there. So a lot of the technology from the horses here I was picking up. Well, here's this runner on the trail up there, and who was progressing on down the hill, and I couldn't believe it. He went through Robinson Flat. I thought, well, he'd probably drop out there. Nope, he was down at Last Chance pretty soon. Then he was up at Devil's Thumb, and pretty soon he was in at French Meadows, still going. And I got to look at him up there, and he kind of had the, if you can kind of imagine, a bag of pool balls in his calves. He was just moving rhythmically down the trail. And maybe just a little bit younger, but still as hirsute as he is today. So I really got interested in what was going on with the physiology of a guy who could run that far, because I was a fly fisherman. I fished the North Fork, Middle Fork, Rubicon, all of these canyons that were about 6 or 8 miles in and 6 or 8 miles out. And by the end of one of those treks in there, I'd been fishing for about 7 or 8 years, I was shot. And I'd lost a lot of fluid, down anywhere from 8 to 12 pounds on one of these ventures. So I was interested in the physiology of the horses, but then I really became interested in Gordy's physiology. So I followed him on down to the finish line, and fortunately, I'm so amazed at that. Phil Gardner was there, and I said, man, you've seen a miracle of the 20th century. You'll never see this happen again.
So when Gordy ran the first time, you weren't part of the medical team other than for the riders?
There wasn't any medical team.
So you didn't have anybody
there was
keeping track of you or checking you along the way? You were like a horse, just around the others. You went into an aid station, looked like the veterinarian was checking on you.
They marked me through every checkpoint where they marked the horses through.
Yeah.
They give you the old PNR check like they do the horses, right?
I think they just said Gordy was here. Or that guy on foot.
So he got down to the finish line, and I think it was at that point I bet Phil Gardner, best bottle of whiskey, that you'll never see this happen again. And he said, well, I think I'll take that bet. So sure enough, I had to pay off a bottle of whiskey when Cowman finished. And then another bottle of whiskey when now with the slow learner, when Andy finished, that's right. So I kind of learned my lesson there, and it wasn't a wild wager that I figured here. I knew what I could do myself getting in and out of one canyon, but getting in and out of all of those canyons was a miracle. I didn't think it would ever happen.
Bob thought he was a hard man, and he wasn't.
Well, back to that iconic picture of going over Cougar Rock, Gordy. I mean, you were carrying like an envelope of erg or something. That was it. No water bottle, no nothing.
My good buddy Dick Threlfel, who he was a horseshoer in Los Altos Hills. At the start, he handed me 2 half-gallon packages of dry mixed erg. And I swear, you talk about all the things that had to come together for this to happen. I would not have made it if he hadn't done that. I went out, I was a pretty good motorcycle rider, and I went out on the Thursday before the race with a backpack full of 10 bottles of Gatorade, and I stashed them with only one exception in exactly the places that we had aid stations in 1978. And the interesting thing is that Shannon and Mo basically decided where those aid stations were going to be, and they came to the same conclusion I did. Basically, it was wherever the road crossed the trail, except for one place at the bottom was the climb in the Devil's Thumb. I stashed one there. And by the way, I rode a motorcycle from Last Chance to Devil's Thumb all year, and I didn't crash it. I only had to stop and restart it twice on that uphill. Yeah. But yeah, we didn't have much. I just had those bags and the 10 bottles, and now I mean I realized I was in terrible shape. I was terribly under fueled. I mean, if my sister Diane hadn't been pulled with a lame horse at Devil's Thumb, I would have quit. I was going to quit, and she said, Gordy, don't quit just yet. She said, oh, Gordy, how are you? I'm quitting. I mean, I'd just seen a horse dying in the river. I was scared. I was exhausted. I felt awful. So she took me over under a tree. She correctly diagnosed me as suffering from hyponatremia, which she wouldn't know that word, but low salt. She fed me salt tablets and water, and a half hour later I was like, guess I'm ready to go.
And you stopped and helped that horse out of the river.
I spent about 15 minutes dragging the horse into shallow water with a bunch of other people so it wouldn't, it collapsed and went unconscious, and it would have drowned. However, it did not make it out of that canyon alive. It never developed enough energy to get out of the canyon. It just died there.
So Shannon, I was wondering, now you've got this doctor along the way here. How did you guys come along to say we're going to need a medical advisor and then let him drive the medical agenda for the race? Because it was obviously a very important part of the race moving forward and taking care of the runners.
Yes, that's true. But when we came together, I always look at it as a piece of pie, as a pie, you know, and we all took a slice of it, what we were good at. And we were glad that, you know, I was thrilled to have Dr. Lynn. We have a doctor among us. And because I sure didn't know anything about it. None of us knew anything about it.
And an emergency room doctor.
An emergency room.
Yeah.
And so we all did what we were good at, you know, and we came together. And fortunately, there were enough of us that were able to fill every piece of the pie, you know, and take off from there.
I'm wondering, Doc, I remember this picture, maybe you remember it, I think it's Andy Gonzalez sitting on one of the tables at Robinson Flat with a thermometer in his mouth. And I was wondering how you came up with the protocol for the race of what would you do at these aid stations. You know, we have the pre-race check-in and then the medical stations now. Is that something you defined and tracked? Because I know that when they started looking at your records, you had records of weights and pulses and respirations back years and years and years.
This comes from sad experiences of walking in and out of the American River canyons after trout. That bedeviled my brain, I guess. But anyway, we just kind of used an emergency room type of record there. Blood pressure, pulse, and temperature, see what was going on. We didn't know anything better. And weight. Weight was the most important thing on that record there. And then I had been down to NASA, National Aviation Space Agency, and talked them into coming up and doing laboratory work. This is for the first race. Well, we had blood pressure, pulse, weight on all the runners. We had this for checks at, the start, day before, and then even the start of the race at 4 a.m. in the morning, and then throughout the race itself. And Shannon, you kept those records, didn't you?
Well, I transcribed them all.
Okay.
Yeah, on that, everybody's seen it.
Okay.
On the results that floats around everywhere that was my first job. Mo Sproul at the time asked me to. You have better handwriting than I can. Yeah.
Here's what they look like.
Yeah. So I wrote all that out.
We had the runners here. Blood pressure, pulse, weight, small hiss on each of the runners at each station, and how much weight they lost in the course of the run itself. Then we had NASA's laboratory work that extended on over here. So we had, from the first race on, pretty complete records of what was going on. And this is how the 3-5-7 rule evolved. I looked across here, and we had weight losses of 10 pounds or more on every guy or everybody that dropped out. We had phenomenal weight losses here. Coman lost from 204 down to 185 pounds. We had Dick Mendenhall, he lost 15 pounds. We had others that lost 11 to 14 pounds. And this wiry little, what is the guy from Los Alamos?
John Kappas.
John Kappas, yeah. He weighed in at 121 pounds at the start. He weighed in at 111 pounds where he quit at Michigan Bluff. Most of them quit at Michigan Bluff. And so we had sodiums on all of these people, in addition to their weights, their vital signs. And where we found that they had lost 10 pounds, this was roughly 10%, roughly 7% of their body weight where they quit. So we figured, well, it sounds like that's where they really kind of poop out here. So that was upper range. So that was the 7%. Then we followed Andy Gonzalez all the way across here, and he was doing really good at 5% or less. And he went
even in that little skimpy outfit.
He was jettisoning all the weight. But he got into the finish line, and he had lost from 156 pounds down to 145 and a half pounds, 10 pounds. So we figured, well, that sounds like a pretty good marker right there. And 3% he was just flying, and 5% he was slowing down, and 7% he was done, but he was done with the race also. But those are the origins of the 3 and 5 and 7% that have held up pretty much from the wild guesses that we were making in those days. But having a little background in this myself, I knew that if I was down the equivalent of that, I was feeling pretty ugly.
Yeah, if you can't see that, it's the actual record of the 1977 race, which would have been the first official race. So it's, you know, Andy at the top because he made it all the way across, and the two other finishers.
And it was just fortuitous that we gained all this information that Shannon and Mo and all the others that contributed to this, plus myself, put it together.
So that's the 3-5-7 rule I was going to ask you about.
Right.
You got ahead of me there. The other one that I was going to ask you about, because it's important after the race now, is how you got onto CPK levels and why that you thought that was so fascinating.
CPK levels were elevated, and Gil Lane was doing some of the early research work, and he did a summary of the first 3 or 4 years and wrote an article for Ultra Running. Ultra Running was our Bible at that time of where we were going to publish all this stuff. We figured if we wrote something for a medical journal, it would get around to the runners for about 10 years. And Ultra Running was a good magazine and is followed carefully by especially ultra runners. But what was your question?
About CPK.
Oh, CPK, yeah. The CPK was elevated, and the CPK is nothing but a marker enzyme. And it tells how much myoglobin you have in your bloodstream. Well, we were getting CPKs into the thousands. And the normal value of CPK is like 64 to 224. You go into an emergency room with CPK of 10,000, and they'll want to slap you in the ICU. That was in the early days. But pretty soon we got so used to 10,000, we were just almost passé about it.
That was a good number at the finish line. You're doing really well at 10,000.
That was an average, 10,000. We were getting numbers up to, the highest one we had was 221,100. And we weren't getting the levels back immediately. I got this back Sunday night from a laboratory that called me about 11 o'clock. So we tracked this guy down in the middle of the night. He was down at Livermore or somewhere in the Bay Area there. Woke him up, told him to get into the emergency room immediately and get some fluids going in there, because this big molecule sets up in the glomeruli, the little filter system of the kidney itself. And little filter system in the kidney there, and if it sets up over a period of say like 12 to 24 hours, it solidifies and it kills the tissue in there, and the tissue has to restore itself probably after renal dialysis, and then a period of about anywhere from 10 to 14 days where the stem cells in the membrane of the kidney, of the glomeruli there, where stem cells reproduces the epithelium, and it grows back and restores the function of the kidney again. BUN, creatinine go off the wall with this here, and uric acid too, plus potassium. The big thing that kills you is potassium. And ordinarily the potassium is less than, say, like, it goes up to 3.5, 5.3. But if it gets up into the 6s and the 7s, you're in danger of ventricular fibrillation, and your heart just stops and kind of wiggles around like a bunch of worms is in it, and doesn't become functional, and you die.
Wow.
So ultra running can be a fatal illness. We've never...
Gordy's still here.
But treated properly, if you hydrate in the first 12 hours, 12 to 24 hours, after you finish this run, you're all going to have high CPKs. They'll be in the 10,000, 20,000, higher than that, probably 50 or 100,000 sometimes. But if you hydrate 8 to 12 ounces every 4 hours, in the first 12 to 24 hours after the race, we've never had anyone had to go to an emergency room, no dialysis, and they all go home. As soon as the pee kind of turns from brown to kind of a yellow to kind of a clear, they're home free. And by free, I mean minus a lot of medical expenses, like dialysis, which doesn't run cheap.
I'd like to add that before dialysis, people who went that far simply died. Dialysis gives the kidneys time to regenerate, but people would die before the kidneys would regenerate. So it used to be a fatal experience to go that far.
Gordy, Shannon piqued my interest about Drew Barner. Could you share a little bit about what Drew talked to you about, and maybe some of those conversations and what led you to think about running the race?
Well, it's little known that the actual, if you could consider me the founder of trail ultra running, the sport actually started in the middle of May in 1973 when I ran the Castle Rock 50 as a training run with Jim Larimer, my ride and tie partner. Just a training.
Horse ride.
Yeah, it's a horse ride. Thank you. So Jim bet me. I said, I think I'll go down with you. Now, I had just run the fastest marathon that had ever been run by a guy who weighed over 200 pounds. I cut 16 minutes off the previous record. I ran 2:52. And yeah, it's pretty fast. Now, once upon a time, I was pretty good. Can't believe how much I've slowed down. But so I went down there and I ran that, and I did it in 50. He bet I couldn't finish. He bet me $10 I couldn't finish. Beat 10 of the finishing horses, and I finished in 9 hours between the 38th and 39th horse in the field of 90. So he lost $10. But he came back and he told, well, you know, he was Wendell's grandson-in-law, and so he talked to Wendell and Drusilla quite a bit, and he told them about me running that. And, you know, I have never, ever seen, I mean, I don't know about Shannon, I've never seen Wendell tell a joke. Wendell took everything seriously. Everything. But Drew had she had the quickest ability to run a quip on somebody, and she came back with, oh, well, if he can do the Castle Rock in 9 hours, he should be able to do our race in 18. and Jim passed that on back to me. And, you know, I said, well, you know, Jim, it doesn't work that way. So, but then the subject died. And then, you know, the race was coming up in July, late July, early August. And I would take my horse from Michigan Bluff to Auburn once a week in preparation for this race. That's what the training was. And I had just gotten a different horse. On my first horse, you know, I actually gave it away to a girlfriend because I knew we were going to spend the rest of our lives together. And then she left me for a guy with really good drugs, who was short, fat, and bow-legged and married, and she lived in a shed because he had the best drugs. This is more entertaining.
We want to hear This is why we didn't let him organize the run.
So, anyway, I had this horse that, you know, this friend of mine who sold her to me, knowing she had a permanent lameness problem, said, you never have to worry about this horse going lame. She's never even out to take a lame step. So, naturally, on the 1 week before the race, that horse went lame. And I was coming up, I mean, it's hard to understand. Wendell had created a situation, a universe, where the most important thing in the world was the Western States 100-mile ride. Everything, that took precedence over everything. And here I was 1 week before the race with a lame horse, coming up Roby Drive. Drew's out there watering her plants. Hi, Gordy. Very cheery. How's it going? Well, I started pouring out this long, sad story, and she said, wait, don't go away. She came back with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses, and she said, here, fill my glass of wine, and get very nice white wine. Said, sit down. Now tell me all about it. So she waited until I ran out of my long sad story, and then she invited me to run it the next year. She also told me to reshoe my horse, have it professional, because I'd shot it myself. That didn't help, obviously, because it was a suspensory ligament. You know, you just don't heal those. But anyway, that's when she advised. She said next year is the 20th anniversary of the ride, and I think that would be a wonderful time. She said, this is the royal we, me and Wendell, we have been wondering, you spend more time on foot than you do on horseback, and of course, that's because I led my horse on all the downhills, and I held onto his tail on all the uphills. And as you either know already or are about to find out, that trail out there is more up and down than it is flat. So she was right. I was spending more time on foot than I was on horseback. And she said, so we're wondering when you're just going to leave your horse behind and do it all on foot. And I didn't say anything, and she said, well, next year's the 20th anniversary of the ride, and I think that'd be a wonderful time for you to just leave your horse behind and do it on foot. And I said, maybe. And the next year, being a procrastinator, I had not bought a new horse. And so I had a choice. I could either sit on the sidelines, which I found very painful, or give it a shot.
Might I add that in those years, Wendell and Drew were wildly enthusiastic. Anybody that was involved with the Western States Trail Ride were wildly enthusiastic to recruit anyone. You, come on. Yeah. And that's exactly the bug I had too, is to, you've got to come and see this. You've got to come and do this. So I always say that Wendell vaccinated us with this infection for the trail and the ride and the run.
We owe it all to Wendell and a Southern California beach girl who liked drugs better than me.
We'll make sure to put that in next year's program. Shannon, at Hart Federal, you had a number of roles, including switchboard operator, and often you were the first voice when people would call and ask about. Share a little bit about how you would try to become kind of the cheerleader in chief for the race when you hear these voices from distant places wondering about, can I do this race?
Well, yeah, actually, I had just come off of a summer when we covered the entire Pony Express Trail, Phil Gardner and me and a bunch of other people. And I got back and I needed a job. And if you needed a job and you were an endurance rider in Auburn, you went to go see Wendell. And, you know, they just went, oh, well, hey, the switchboard's open. I said, I'll take it. So suddenly, you know, calls come in, hello. And then I want to know about the run. I want to know about this run. So naturally, I had to tell them all about it. So that's how I got, and I didn't last on the switchboard very long. I went to the retirement accounts very shortly after there. And, but, you know, I got this reputation for when somebody would call, I'd say, oh, hi, Joe, how are you? How are you doing? Somebody told me one time, he says, voices are like photographs to you. You recognize everybody's voice, which I did, you know. I mean, they call and, hi, how you doing? I could just instantly recognize who it was. And part of this whole plan was that I was talking to people around the country. I was talking to people who would call and say, well, I've been running 80 miles a week. My kids don't know me anymore. My wife's really mad at me, and my friends all think I'm crazy. And I was the only person that would say, sounds like you're doing everything just right. That's how much I wanted them to come from Iowa, from Pennsylvania, from Florida, from anywhere.
Carolina.
From Michigan, yeah, from all you people. That's how much I wanted them to come and see this, because it was so incredible. So you had to come and share it with us. So that's, you know, I gave them that support that they weren't getting at home. So that was my job.
How many divorces happened after that?
Well, I've had two.
And you're not a runner.
No, I'm not even a runner.
Now, how many people here are experiencing the trail for the first time? Maybe this weekend? Raise your hand.
Question.
Wow.
Welcome.
Welcome home.
I think it might be helpful. Maybe, Gordy, could you talk a little bit about how the trail has changed? When you ran it, was it more difficult, less difficult? You didn't have Mark Falcone, Charlie Gabry, people like that out there manicuring the trail, or was it in pretty good shape back then? And how is it different than today?
Well, there wasn't as much erosion back then because it hadn't been used by that many horses and that many people for that long. But it was, in 74, it was extremely difficult simply because I had to either run at the speed of the horses, which, they were much slower than me on the downhill. Horses tend to go lame if they're run or trotted downhill. And much faster than me on the flat and the uphill. And so I spent a lot of time really at the wrong pace, running way faster than I should have. Or standing beside the trail and losing time, just, letting horses go by, because I couldn't run that fast anymore. Running with the horses made it really, really difficult. It made it very hard. And of course, a huge amount of dust. I mean, the amount of dust they throw up, it's just, I mean, it was every Sunday was, Sunday and Monday was a black snot day.
It's hard to segue on some of this stuff. Why don't we open it up to some questions from
Actually, I'd like to tell a story.
Sure, by all means.
In 1971, it was the first year I rode the ride. I was down at UC Santa Barbara going to school, and I bought a horse who was somebody had said he'd make a good endurance horse, and I'm kind of an adrenaline junkie. He ran away with me and threw me 3 times, and then I just came back and said, I'll buy him. The horse had a lot of gas pedal and really lousy steering and brakes. That made him very excited. So, I rode that horse in 71 and 72, and he's a very durable horse. I probably could have finished him, 10 times in a row if I hadn't given him to the woman I was going to spend my life with. And so in 71, I was riding, and we were on a normal trail, and then we got to Red Star Ridge, and it was just the most awful pushed out, just what they do in a logging place where they just want to push something out, so a cat can get through, a caterpillar tractor, or to skid logs. I mean, it was miserable. But what had happened was Wendell had decided that the trail from Tahoe City down to the Squaw Valley area was just getting too civilized, and so he wanted to take that section out and add something that was really pioneering. And they got to looking at the map, and here's this, they said, hey, if we just go down Red Star Ridge, that's 8 miles, that'll give us the 8 miles back, and then it's only 6 miles in Robinson Flat, which is about what it was from the top of Red Star Ridge around. That'll be perfect. And so he told Roy Duncan, go up there and push out the trail. Well, Roy didn't really have time to push out the whole thing. There's 8 miles, he pushed out about 4 or 5, and from the rest, they just tied ribbon to ribbon and bushes, and we kind of plowed through this. Oh, it was awful. It was just awful. Well, Charlie Barrio, the photographer, he was reviled as a gossip during this time. We now know he's an oral historian. And he was very, very good friends with Drew Barner. She trusted Charlie, and she trusted him on what to talk about and who to talk about, which is really interesting. Because I found out later I'm the only person that Charlie told this to, which really surprised me. But 3 days after that ride, it was on a Tuesday, Wendell got a call, and Drusilla's listening to half of the conversation, and then Wendell filled her in on the other half afterwards, and then Drusilla talked to Charlie, and Charlie told me. I don't know why me, but he did. He chose me. So here's the story. Phone rings. Guy called. Wendell says, and it's for Wendell. Okay, so Wendell, this is so and so. He's superintendent of Tahoe National Forest. He said in a nonchalant manner, I just called to tell you need to find a new trail. Wendell goes, what's this about? He says, well, you trespassed on federal property. You did tremendous destruction. You had no permit. You're not going to use it. Your future request for a permit will be denied. And Wendell said, now see here, listen to reason. And the guy says, no, you listen to reason. You are never going to use that trail again. And Wendell said, I'll call Dick. And the guy prophetically said, you call whoever you want, as long as I am superintendent of this national forest, you will never use that trail. Well, Wendell and Drew were quite impressed with the fact that I was stupid enough to be the first person ever to attempt to ride that ride on a bareback pad without stirrups. And very impressed by the fact that in spite of the horrendous pain that caused me, I finished. And so they invited me to the next board of directors meeting, which was 3 weeks later. Wendell got up, banged the gavel, and the first words out of his mouth were, I am pleased to announce that we now have new and more enlightened leadership of Tahoe National Forest. Does anybody know who Dick was? Dick Nixon. Wendell was one. Now, some of you historians will know about the Checkers speech. That's when it was discovered that a group of California businessmen had each donated $5,000 in 1948. That's a lot of money then, to start Richard Nixon's political career. Wendell was one of those. Wow. He was the fund behind the Checkers speech. Yeah, and as you know from Richard Nixon's history, he never forgot a friend. There's actually a sequel to this story. In about 1980 or 81, Wendell decided that Forest Hill was getting too civilized, and so he sent the Lorang brothers, who I went to school with them in Colfax, engineering family, you know, they pushed dirt to push out a horizontal trail that we now travel. But it eliminated all of Forest Hill and Todd Valley. It still eliminates Todd Valley. But it started where you come out of Volcano Canyon, you got up to where it starts that steep uphill, it just went sideways. It went through private property, it went through public property. Wendell never asked anybody for permission. We were doing the training run, and this guy comes out, get off my property! God damn it! I'm just following the trail. I don't care! It's my property! I'm leaving. Anyway, the merchants of Forest Hill solved the problem of the private property by saying, please, Wendell, don't take the ride out of our town. We need the money. And so Wendell relented. That solved the private property problem. But what was interesting was all the rest, where you drop down from Forest Hill down into the canyon, that's all BLM and Bureau of Reclamation federal property. And that's all administered by people just like the guy who was head of Tahoe National Forest. The silence was deafening. Nobody said anything. And you may wonder why. Ronald Reagan was president. And when Ronald Reagan was governor in Sacramento, he had a local ranch between Grass Valley and Nevada City, or Grass Valley and Auburn, and his favorite riding partner was Wendell Roby.
I know which way to vote the next election. Why don't, if anybody has any questions, stand up, tell us where you're from and what your question is. So anybody, please. Yeah, Mr. Wolf.
My name is Scott. I live in Oregon, and actually my question is for Dr. Lind. First of all, I think it's awesome that you're back here. It's great to see you. It's great to hear your stories, but in all the years that you were medical director at Western States, I would love to hear some of the worst excuses that you've heard for people choosing to quit the run.
Choosing to quit?
Choosing to quit.
Oh, it might be better to ask him about the ones who wanted to go on and shouldn't.
So you can do both, either one, but we want to hear some good stories.
Well, let me tell you one of the closest to dying stories on the Western States Trail that I ever saw. And that was, and I have permission to tell the story because there's Don Choi. You know Don Choi, he is a world-class runner. And Don weighed in at Squaw Valley at 116 pounds, and I weighed him in at Robinson Flat at 125, and I said, Don, what's going on here? I thought maybe he'd kind of filled his pockets with something or wore some extra clothes, and he gave a reasonable answer. And he continued on down the trail. And he went down about 15 miles further, well, about 12 miles further, and he had a seizure. And vomited, and just a terrible scene down there. They finally called a helicopter, got him over to Auburn Faith Hospital, and this was late in the afternoon. He got in the Auburn Faith Hospital at about 6 o'clock. And he was way overloaded with fluid. His sodium was about 114. Ordinarily that would be about 135 to 153 or so right in there. But anyway, he was really diluted out. So the docs there did a wonderful job of putting a catheter in, and in the first 2 hours they drained out 1,900 cc's of urine, and in the next 2 hours they got out 5 liters of fluid, and in the next 12 hours he dropped 90, in the 12 hours from 6 o'clock that night till 6 o'clock the next morning, he dropped 9,500 cc's of fluid.
So do you want to tell everybody as far as the size of an IV bag, how many IV bags that is?
A liter is about a quart. Okay, and 9 liters, that's about 9 quarts, gives you an idea of gallons there. So he had a lot of fluid in him. But the serious part of this was he was unconscious when he hit the emergency room, and it was about 6 o'clock. By 7:30, I got to the hospital and took a look at him. He was on an x-ray table, and he had what we refer to as decerebrate posturing. That's kind of outward rotation of the arms, extension of the head backward, eyes looking up over your brow.
That's what we call in yoga class corpse pose.
I thought I was looking at one, and I really felt ugly about the whole thing for not having detected it at Robinson Flat. But he's kind of a quiet guy, and he just gave a normal answer to the questions I was asking him. Well, 10 o'clock, he was coming around and asking, he wanted to get back in the race at 1 o'clock. And he had to be restrained with belts and the rest of the apparatus they restrained him with. And by the next morning, at 10 o'clock, he'd got one of the local newspapers and was reading it, but I talked to him at that point, and he couldn't do simple math or anything like that. He was a postman down in San Francisco. But it shows you how quickly, if you have acute hyponatremia, that is onset within 12 hours, you can reverse this here very quickly without damaging the brainstem. But when you see this corpse pose or decerebrate posturing, or whatever you want to call it, that means that the brain is swelling enough. There are no exits from the brain except through the foramen magnum. And his brain was being pushed down through the foramen magnum, producing this type of posturing. And we just felt so fortunate for having the good docs in Auburn to take care of him at that time. They used mannitol and Lasix and diuresis, everything that they could out of him quickly enough to salvage it. That's one of the worst cases we've had. Well, I'll tell a few more worst cases.
Bob, why don't you tell about that one I saw down at Ford's Bar? I came along one morning, you know, well, in the dark, and I guess it wasn't morning, it was in the middle of the night. And there's this guy, and he's down like this. Just at the bottom of that great big hill you guys went up today, that really hard one. And he's got his light like this, and he's way down, and he's on his knees and his, his shoulders, everything down. And I said, "Are you all right?" We ask stupid questions. And he says, "Yeah." And I said, "You don't look all right. Why are you here?" He said, "My pacer went down to the river to get some water." And I thought, okay, he's got a pacer, so I went on. Well, anyway, I saw Bob after the race, and he says, "Well, somebody did his best to die on us this year." And I said, "Oh, really? Where was that?" He says, "Ford's Bar." I said, "I saw that guy." And he said, "Yeah, they had a doctor there, and he was being very generous with his IV fluids, so he'd run out of IV fluids when this guy got there. And they had to like put him in a Jeep and get him to Auburn Hospital as fast as they could." But you can probably tell us more about that one.
Well, I think they probably diuresed him out because I think he was out of the hospital in 12 or 24 hours afterwards. So the docs up at Auburn Hospital, Center Auburn Hospital, have had enough experience with probably over, what are we, 15,000, 17,000 runners now?
We've trained them well.
Yes. So they've had enough experience that hyponatremia isn't anything that they fear anymore. But the CPK elevation that doesn't get treated requires the occasional renal dialysis. We had two guys, one Floyd Whiting, who has written his own article up in Runners or Ultra Running. He had 159 consecutive ultras, and got into trouble at 98 miles. He'd injured himself, didn't have enough pre-race training. Went home to Reno without seeing anybody, went to bed, and woke up Monday morning with renal shutdown. Went to the hospital, had total renal dialysis performed on him on an emergency basis. Was in the hospital for, I think, 9 or 10 days. Got out, and he was the second case. The first one was back in Maryland, who was his buddy 10 years earlier. And he went home to Maryland, didn't get immediate help after feeling really ugly on Monday morning, and went in Tuesday, and he required renal dialysis too. Those are the only two cases of untreated CPK, markedly elevated systems here that didn't get treated and required renal dialysis. I can't think of anyone right offhand who had a silly excuse for quitting, other than the guy with the wingtip shoes. And why he even showed up, I don't know.
Hey, everybody was doing it from
Yep.
San Francisco.
More questions from the audience.
Oh, come on.
I'll ask a silly question. It's Paul from the UK. I just want to ask Gordy, a lot of the old pictures, everyone had long hair and beards. Is that going to help me in the race?
I think Gordy should have the answer on that, but Bob, go ahead.
I didn't hear the question.
Oh, long hair and beards, is that gonna help our friend from the UK finish? 'Cause it looks like he's got a bit of a growth on his face. And
Gordy, you can speak to this better than
I think you don't have a long enough beard for it to be a significant help.
But the fellows without any hair at all on top there have a better evaporation surface, and as you know, evaporation is a cooling remedy. It's
You know, may I say, Jim King attributed a lot of his success to his, what he called his big mop of hair, because he would just get it wet, and it served as a cooling.
Stay wet for a while.
Yeah, it was, so it does help. Keep growing it.
There's a picture of me or a portion of one of the Desperate Dreams films that were done in 81 and 82, I believe. Very good. You should get a copy of them if you can. Do we have them on the website? It's on the Western States website. Excellent movies. $25,000 budget, and I think they did some of the best movies that have ever been done. Anyway, they got one picture. They actually sent a cameraman down to that creek at the bottom of the Devil's Thumb Climb, and they got a picture of me coming through, sticking my head under, going like that, and heading up the hill. And so that's what you want to do, fella. Dip your head in there, and you know, put your hands in there too. It makes a huge difference. Put your hands in there, because you get an awful lot of cooling surface on your hands, because there's so much skin on your hands compared to the volume of your hands.
Gordy, I'm curious about Mountain Dew and you. I think, do you lay off of drinks like that until you run the race, and then it's sort of like rocket fuel when you take it, or how exactly does that work, and what's kind of behind that? Is it Mountain Dew? Am I right? Or
I had a great conversation one time. I came out of Forest Hill, and I passed a lady who was a patient of mine and a runner, and I passed her just as I hit the flat out of Forest Hill, where you get on you're on this water line to a power plant. You don't know it, but it's a water line, and it comes from both creeks, and it goes out to the point, and then there's this big penstock that goes down to a turbine out down on the river. And I just hit the level, and I was just going really good. And she said, "Oh, you're doing rather well, Gordy." I said, "Yes." I've got a lot of caffeine in me, and my body is totally unaccustomed to caffeine. And I am feeling like I'm just barely touching the ground. And she said, "Oh, no," I said, "It's probably kind of like speed." And she said, "Oh, I could use a little speed right now." So, yeah, that is a technology that I do. Yeah, and there is a, I would strongly advise everybody here, quit doing caffeine right now, all stimulants, and then don't do them on race day until you get to Forest Hill, because it'll only keep you up. No matter how much more you take in, caffeine will only keep you up for 10 or 12 hours. It'll only keep you elevated for 10 or 12 hours.
I can speak from experience. The first time I ran the race in 1997, I was running along, and I was I saw Gordy at the beginning of the race, and I thought, that old man, he's going to finish way behind me. And then in the middle of the night, as I was stumbling along, I don't know, around ALT or something, it was just like, it was incredible the way Dr. Lynn described Gordy, and just how when he gets it going, you really get it going. He just flew by me, and he easily finished under 24, and I ran 24:01. And I think he was riding that caffeine high, and I was looking for anything I could get. Yeah. Shannon, I'm curious about the idea of the race's narrative, and how, at a very early time you were able to understand that we have a story, and that story needed to be told. Was that something that was difficult to sell to other people? That the concept of there was more life to this race than just the race itself. It was people, and it was history, and how were you able to kind of bring all that together?
Interesting. First of all, I went to a school called the Pacific Coast Equestrian Research Farm, which was about horses. And the people that ran this school, Went and Linda Tellington, who I've recently written a book about this whole thing, while I was at that school, they were pioneers of the sport of endurance riding. And they talked about Wendell Roby all the time, and the Tevis Cup ride, and the Western States Trail. So I spent a year just learning all about that among every other discipline with horses. And so by the time, and that's where I met Phil Gardner, who I later married. So
what was he doing there?
He was an endurance rider. And this school in Badger, California was the epicenter for endurance riders.
So he taught there or something?
No, he would come to do the rides there. Okay. So, Cliff Lewis and Pat Fitzgerald and all those early endurance riders, they would all come, and that's where I met them. But, and they taught the U.S. cavalry methods of horsemanship. So, and that's all about riding a horse for a long distance over rugged terrain as fast as you can. So that's perfect for the origins of the sport of endurance riding. So I came into that with that, and I was like, knew it. It was in my cells. So I already came in with this knowledge. So when I showed up and started working for Wendell Roby, when I got the job there, and when I saw the seed of the run, like I said, I just come off of 60 days living on the Pony Express Trail. All of those things were dovetailing perfectly for me. So when this run idea started dancing on top of all of this information that I already had and loved, it just only made sense. It was just the perfect collaboration for me. And that's when I thought, wow, this will be easy. This is great. I mean, I always had a sense of the vision of the race, of the run. I always had a sense of what would be best for us. You know, it just came. You know, it still does. You know, I mean, I still get ideas about the run that I just sort of put away now because I'm not involved anymore. But it just became really a perfect storm, you know, for success.
And Dr. Lind, you know, in Squaw Valley, one of the real highlights was to, you know, sure, everybody likes to think the president, when the president talks, everybody pays attention, but really nobody listens to what the president has to say. Everybody would wait for Dr. Lind to come up and give you the couple of minutes of advice. It was sort of like if you're a writer and you use the elements of style. That's a great manual because it's so simplistic and so true. There's nothing variable about it. Dr. Lind would give you 2 or 3 really common sense tips. And, you know, I think for the help of some of the folks who are here for the first time, what would be a couple of the couple of tips that you would always impart to everybody in Squaw Valley?
Stay hydrated. And we've done studies with this here. We've done them on Tim here with our magic calculator called a copper wire attached to his singlet here. And I think that was way back in 85 or so, or 86, somewhere in there. But we'd get the volunteers, check the size of their bottles, and then attach copper wire to their singlet and have them put a bend in the copper wire each time they finish a bottle. And then we'd collect those or straighten the wire at the next aid station, and then cumulatively aggregate all this here up until the finish line. And we checked Tim out, let's see, 2 times, and I think he checked out at 720 ounces of fluid 2 years in a row. You can tell he's an engineer. Which amounted to 27% of his body weight. He was 172 pounds at that time. And so that was about 27% of his body weight. Well, the others, they were a little bit more, up to 33%. So we chopped off 10% on both ends and decided maybe 30% of your body weight needs to be consumed in the course of this race. And we won't miss it very far. And you can check this when you finish running this race. You'll consume about 10% of your body weight, minus about 2 bottles, up to Robinson Flat, 30.6 miles. And then you'll need about 10% of your body weight, plus about 2 bottles, to get to Forest Hill. And then that's a 62-mile marker. And then the rest of the miles in, 38 miles in, you'll drink the other 10% of your body weight in fluid. And you'll pretty much stay in the bubble with all of that. Your urine will be kind of a nice liquid yellow, and it won't be brown at all. And you should stay right on the weight that you started out with at the start there, and you should finish within 2 pounds of your starting weight. So look me up at the finish line and tell me how far wrong I was. But we've checked it a couple of times, and we feel pretty confident that if you stick with those parameters, you'll be pretty close to where you need to be as far as your fluids are concerned. Then the sodium is the other part. You got to stay up in your sodium. If your weight is up, you cut down on your fluids, and you always use the Gatorade or whatever sodium-containing liquid is your choice. And don't forget about Succeed, the capsule. S-caps? No, S-caps. S-caps, that's what it is. S-caps, good content sodium.
It's excellent. I think it's time for some closing thoughts here. We have a question?
Could you talk a little bit about the Norm Klein years and the development of the service requirement? I kind of heard things like there was some pretty funny stories about Norm telling people they couldn't run if they didn't fulfill the service requirement.
That's before my time.
Really?
I've heard.
I mean, well, that was why we implemented that. Was the reason that we implemented the service requirement is because many of us felt like we were taking the weight of putting on the, producing the sport, and there was just so much to do, trail work, working at aid stations, doing this and doing that. And we just thought, you know what, this can't just be a take only for runners. It has to be a give back too. And that was primarily the reason why we implemented that. And and I think it's still a good idea. And I think that people shouldn't skirt it, and they should respect it. If they want to run a damn race, they should pitch in and help. I know. I mean, I'm not a runner, and I gave over 30 years of my heart and soul to this event, and runners are takers. They got to give back.
Yeah, I just heard some stories through, I think, Bruce, about how there were some runners that once you instituted that requirement, they thought because they were elite they didn't have to do that, and Norm just said no.
Well, they should get over themselves. Does that answer your question?
I just heard that there were some pretty interesting stories.
Well, listen, I mean, whatever it is, whatever you're going to do, somebody's going to think they're so special that they can, not get away, not do something. And it's a sport. There's no money in it, You do this for the love of it. In fact, we tried money. We had prize money when we had First Interstate Bank, and we gave away thousands of dollars to the top 5 men and women. And I'm telling you, and I was for it. I said, well, let's try this. Let's see how this feels. It turned the competitors into needle-nosed sharks. There was just such a shift in their attitudes. And I just went, I don't want anything to do with that anymore. And the rest of the board felt the same way, and we just continued that in a hurry. In fact, Chuck Jones won that year, and he won a bunch. I think he won $5,000. He went out and bought this fabulous motorcycle and jumped on that motorcycle and rode it all the way to Salt Lake City, where he showed up, riding the motorcycle. He showed up at the Wasatch 100, got out of his motorcycle man riding suit, and at the pre-race meeting, and said, "Hi everybody, I'm Chuck Jones. I'm here to run your race," and went out and won it. So
and rode the motorcycle back.
And rode the motorcycle home. Yeah. So I guess it was good because Chuck Jones really deserved winning that money. And
so Shannon, was that something you guys were first to institute the service requirement?
Pardon me?
Was Western States the first to institute?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question for Dr. Lind. Obviously, metabolism and training conditioning are paramount, but on a secondary level, what about footgear and the evolution of it from the 70s, 80s? When people ran it in tennis shoes and
wingtips
and hiking boots and wingtips, and how did it get better with lighter and actually the evolution, the history of actually endurance running?
The shoes that Shannon had, they were the waffle stompers. You saw the shoes that Shannon had, they were the waffle stompers that Nike produced, and they were very popular for many years. Finally, they came along with better shoes, bigger soles, more adapted to the foot, different lasts that fit the bottom of your foot better. Some that had thicker soles, better tread, I don't know, there's so many different shoes out there now that I can't keep track of them. And I think you have to go with a shoe that fits you best, that makes your feet feel comfortable, and one that collects the fewest rocks.
The first Western States was running a pair of Adidas SL72s, which probably none of you are old enough to remember, but they did not have you have an insole and an outsole and a cushioned midsole. They didn't have a cushioned midsole under the forefoot. And as a result of that, I had continuous blood blisters all the way across the ball of my foot. It hurt a lot.
Did you run the whole race in one pair of shoes because somebody lost your shoes out there at Echo Hills?
Actually, I was intending to change into Adidas Gazelles, which are very soft and cushiony, at Robinson Flat, but the lady who was crewing for me couldn't find them in her camper, and so she handed them to me 2 weeks later. So I would have not had those blood blisters because those Adidas Gazelles had a lot of cushion, but the SL72s had a really good traction tread, which is why I used them, and they're low to the ground. When you're up in the rocks, low to the ground's good. You don't less leverage to twist your ankles and such. But once you leave Robinson, the trail gets a lot better. Well, until you get to the canyons. Basically, if you learn to run rocks, you can run in any shoes.
The Terra Humeras ran in the Huaraches, and
tire casings.
Oh, right? Yeah,
tire casings.
Yeah. And as soon as they got out of the snow, the year they were here, they strapped on their tire casings, and away they went. And
they went a lot faster after that.
That's right. They were used to running in them. If you can run in tire casings, you can run in about anything.
It kind of depends on a person's body. I would say there's a lot of experimentation going on in shoes right now. You got the Hokas that are going for really, really thick, a lot of very cushioned soles. And then there's the other minimal shoes that are going down to almost a flat foot with very little cushion. And that requires a whole bunch of different muscles to work in your body, in your foot especially, muscular foot. It's something you want to work into gradually if you decide to go that way. But people, right now there's a major experimentation going on in trail ultra running in terms of shoes, and it'll be very interesting to see how it sorts out.
Any other questions from the audience before we wrap up? Before I ask the final question, I want to thank you guys again for this has been fabulous, and learned a whole bunch tonight about our history. So everybody, if you could give them a Another question. I have two questions.
I have a word of advice.
Hold on. We're going to get to that. Oh, okay. Because I have the classic left brain, right brain question. I have two questions. First question is, how has Western States enriched your lives? And then the second is, if you had one piece of advice for everybody here in the room, what would it be? Shannon?
Learn as much as you can and rub it in your hair. Really get out there and rub it in your hair. Because it will be an experience that you will live with for the rest of your life, and you want to make it great. And how has it enriched my life? Well, I was able to do a lot of things. Everything from marker pens to, making a banner. I don't know, just everything skill I had, I've been able to use with the Western States. And it showed me a lot about who I am. So I'm proud of it. I feel like it was kind of my baby when this kid growing up, and I don't have kids, but I always had this slew of runners out there that I was the mother superior to, so it was very satisfactory for me.
Gordy?
Well, I'd like to comment on what Shannon said, and that is, one of the best things a human being can do is something that makes life better on this planet. And she has certainly done that for an awful lot of people. And, Wendell has done that, Drew did that, Shannon, Mo, all that, the original people, me and Bob, we all feel that you know, warm feeling in the pit of our stomach from basically having made the world a better place. You know, that's one of the goals that most of us have in our lifetime. You know, that's something we'd like to do, and you know, some of us get to do it, and we're just very fortunate. We were able to do that. It's just a wonderful feeling. Personally, how it changed my life, of course, was that I always took kind of like the expectations of other people for what was the limits of what I could do in life. And, you know, like when my friend talked about his cousin's rock climbing in Yosemite and climbing El Cap and all that stuff, you know, I thought, well, you know, that's kind of like, you know, that's what other people do. But what the Western States taught me is that even if people say something can't be done, that doesn't mean it can't be done. And that doesn't mean that you can't do it. You know, it really gets down to that. And there's still those challenges out there. You never know it until it comes up to you. And the only reason, you know, I'm the guy sitting here is that I said yes. You know, I was a runner with a lot of confidence. I was a rider with okay confidence, enough to do the 100-mile ride. I was in this position. I wasn't the only person with running talent who was also a rider, but I'm the one who dreamed the big dream and did it. So, you know, you just have to say yes when those things come, and you say, yes, I'll go, I'm going to try it. And the impossible is often possible. Oh, and advice, if you're ever in doubt of what to eat, boiled potatoes dipped in salt. Now, you have to chew them until they turn to liquid, because if you're like me, your pancreas kind of shuts down as you go through the race, and you won't digest the potatoes because you don't have the amylase coming down from your pancreas. But you always have saliva. As long as you have saliva, you will be able, it digests the starch, turns it into sugar. If you're in doubt, that's what you do.
Bob?
Well, your philosophy here reminded me of a poem by Edgar Guest, I think, and it goes, somebody said it couldn't be done, and he, with a chuckle, replied that he wouldn't be the one to say it couldn't be done, at least until he had tried. So he started right in with a trace of a grin on his face. If he doubted, he hid it. And the thing that somebody said couldn't be done, he started right in and he did it. And that's Edgar Guest or somebody wrote that. But I think if you have an aspiration to do something, why, do your best to finish it. And do your best to finish this race. If you use your head, every one of you can probably finish this race. And don't lose confidence in yourself out there. Some of the people we have pulled out of the race 15 minutes, put in the sleeping bag. They got a trucker's nap, which is kind of fast sleep, and put on their feet again, put some oranges in their hand, and pushed them down the trail, and they finished with a silver buckle. So never doubt yourself, and just keep moving. Don't spend much time in the aid stations. Have your crew organized so it's like an Indianapolis Speedway stop. You get in, get out. Don't waste time in 10 stations. You waste 2 minutes extra time in the station with all the adulation that goes on. Oh gosh, it's nice to have that, but you're running against the clock. Keep moving.
We have some tokens of appreciation here that Tim will give our panelists here, hats and the amulets from Acapulco, right? Yeah. So again, here are the descendants of the pioneers of the Western States Trail. Thanks everybody. I was also supposed to say, I forgot, I apologize. Our friends from Monsters of Massage, they're going to be doing massage on Thursday and Friday at Squaw Valley. So if you're interested in that, they're taking reservations to get you all loosened up before you even then destroy yourself. So they're out there to help at Squaw Valley. Thanks.
They're quite good.
Thank you.